I'd like to introduce our guest tonight here with us for the 8th annual Public Relations Museum Women's Event. And I'd like to start off by just with one word, which is courageous. Courageous is just one of the many superlatives that I could use to introduce our guest tonight. Our guest tonight is Muriel Fox, who was one of the original co-founders for the National Organization for Women. She was the original public relations director for NOW, and she helped really to bring about the second wave of the feminist movement, to bring it into fruition. And she did this through her intellect, through her words, through her resilience, through her strategies, and also through her eloquence. And she also was the president of NOW's Legal and Educational Defense Fund, which helped us to think about and to enforce Title VII, particularly with respect to sex discrimination, also to help us to bring about and enforce Title IX. She was also involved in getting the Violence Against Women's Act passed. So just some amazing accomplishments. And I'm going to sort of skim over 6 decades, really, of other work. But most recently, she's also the author of The Women's Revolution, How We Changed Your Life. And she certainly changed my life and everyone's lives who are joining us here tonight. So maybe we should start there. Tell us a little bit about this book I have in my hand here.
Well, the Women's Revolution, I hope, will reach especially young people. They have to know what we accomplished, and if we could do it, you can do it. And there's so much more that still needs to be done, and we are passing the torch to you. But I want you to know what we did and how hard it was, but we succeeded, and you can succeed too. And I also really want history to recognize women, and I mentioned 29 women and 1 man in my book, who history should not forget. Every one of them should be important. Mary Eastwood should be as familiar a name in history classes as Patrick Henry or Betsy Ross. Holly Knox in education. Catherine East. These were great historical figures who changed life forever for all of us. And I do want history to know about them, and especially about Betty Friedan. If I was a co-founder, if we were co-founders, Betty Friedan was the founder of our movement, and everyone should know about Betty Friedan.
Absolutely. I think that it's an important historical record. It's also such a wonderful memoir and to read about your experiences. So I just think it's such an important book for all of us. Maybe since we have just a short period of time together, what might be helpful is if we touch on a few issues about the past, a few issues about the present, and then a little bit going forward as you started to get us thinking about passing a torch. Let's go back to 1966 and let's think about what, at the time that NOW was being founded, describe the landscape of public relations.
Well, public relations, there were no women except in fashion and food. Otherwise, no women, because first of all, public relations drew its people from the media, and the media had no women. And when I applied for my job at Carl Bayer and Associates, which was the largest public relations agency in the world, they said, well, you have good experience, but we don't hire women. Sorry, we don't hire women except for secretaries and except for Jane Buck department. And I ended up through going through another door, the radio and television department, and I did get a job at Carl Bayer, and I ended up being executive vice president. I stayed there about 34 years. But we had to overcome again and again, people saying, sorry, we don't hire women, we don't promote women, we don't give women the same salaries as men, and this was just accepted. We had to prove that we don't accept this. We are going to change the world.
Absolutely. Well, maybe tell us a little bit then, in your role with now, your public relations role, what role did communication play in organizing women that time?
We had to tell the world about it, and and really one reason we succeeded so fast was because the media understood our role. We were on the front pages of all the major newspapers. They knew that this was a revolution and this was changing the world, and people learned about it and they joined. Betty Friedan originally described us, we were going to be, quote, an elite cadre. But once the word got out, hundreds of thousands of people joined. And they did it because of communications, which told the story.
Absolutely. And, I think of today, and we're so dependent on social media, Twitter, right, Facebook. Tell me a little bit about how you reached this mass audience, in addition to newspapers, but at that time, what did you do to get all that information out?
Well, first of all, I mean, all the major publications and news services and networks recognized our professionalism, that we were serious, and that we knew what we were doing, and they treated us seriously. There was some ridiculing, but not much, and so we had the major publications in the media, and then we actually pinpointed whom we had to reach. We had to reach people in each city. We had to reach people in each state. We certainly had to reach people in Congress. And it was very important that we reach the publications that they followed, and that we reach the people who influence them. Just like today, we didn't have social media, but we knew how to reach individuals. And we were very professional about it, and I think that's one reason we succeeded.
Absolutely. Finding those opinion leaders all
Right.
over and getting
We
them
had
to help
press
people.
conferences, we had marches, we certainly press releases, we worked with the wire services, we knew what we were doing.
Absolutely. So, I think of that context, and I think of today, and today we're dealing so much with disinformation and misinformation. Did you struggle with that, or was that just a different experience back then?
No, in those days, if a politician were caught in a lie, his career was over. Today, we accept these lies, and I'm so unhappy about misinformation today, and it's one of the problems that you're going to have to grapple with.
Absolutely, absolutely. Let's shift a little bit in, since you mentioned today, right? Shift a little bit into the current context. And I know this is a big question, but from your perspective, what is sort of the current state of legislation around women's rights?
Well, everybody knows we got to win back abortion rights for a woman to be able to control her own body, for a family to control their bodies. And that's number one, I would say, and the public understands that. We have to get the Equal Rights Amendment passed finally, so women can be in the Constitution. And there's one other very important item, and that's child care. We must get universal child care. The United States ranks behind Zimbabwe in universal child care. And until we have that, frankly, it's going to be very hard for women to succeed in the business world and the political world, because the burden of child care still rests with women.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'll be curious to see last election cycle. At least there was some discussion about paid family leave. it didn't last very long, but at least it came up as an issue again. So I think you're so right.
Elizabeth Warren still has a very good child care bill.
Yeah.
But all we need to pass it is to get a Congress that will support it.
Absolutely, yeah. So what about, it sounds like you would agree then that would you say things are moving forward or backward? I guess I'll leave that as an open question there.
I'd say both.
Okay, fair enough. Yeah.
They're moving forward. I mean, look how far we've come, really. We have to congratulate ourselves on how we have changed the perception of the relationship between men and women. Today we are partners. I mean, that's a monumental change. But we have to fight against those who want to move us backward. And the answer is politics, politics, politics. And this is an election year. And that's what we have to concentrate on. 2024, it's the year we've got to get out the vote. We've got to do everything possible to succeed. You know, we had all these very important laws passed, really great laws. Every one of them was passed, frankly, with a Democratic Congress. So just think about it. We have to have a good Congress. We have to have strong state legislatures that are pro-feminist. We have to have feminist school boards. And this is something we have to get involved in at every level. And it's going to take a lot of work, but it's politics that's the answer right now.
Absolutely, yeah. Yeah, and if I may say, it's also informing young women,
Right.
right? Because
And then informing the men.
Absolutely.
Because their lives were changed for the better also. They have a partner now. They're not totally responsible for all of the family's economics and well-being.
Absolutely, yeah. So in so many ways, our personal and our professional lives are so intertwined. So maybe share with us a little bit, if we continue to see a lessening of women's rights, what effect could that have on women's success in the workplace?
Well, as we know, abortion rights are very important for a woman to move in the world and to have a place in the world. But again, I mean, I'm not discouraged. I mean, we're going to win them back, but we just have to fight. Heather Booth, who's another one that history should not forget, has said, "Don't agonize, organize." And that's the answer.
We need that on the front page.
Right.
Absolutely. Well, let's maybe talk a little bit about the future, because there's so much to think about. Looking forward, what do you think are the role that communication and public relations can play in recapturing some of those rights or making additional progress going forward?
Well, the public has to know. They have to know the importance of what they gained through the women's movement and what they still need to gain and what they lost, frankly, with the Dobbs decision on abortion rights. The public has to know, and also all the misinformation has to be addressed so that the public understands who is lying to you, why they're lying to you, and what is the truth.
Yeah. And this is a different question, but you just made me think of, are there specific things or pieces of misinformation out there that you would want to address in particular and try to correct?
Well, sure. I like the first one is that a fertilized embryo is a person. I think that's what I mean. It is an embryo. It's not a person. And let's start with that one.
Yeah.
And I mean, there are people who have said childcare is socialism. Well, every other country, every other advanced country in the world finds that childcare prepares children better for the future. Actually, Barack Obama began to call it early childhood development. It's development of the children, childcare. It's not socialism. And it's not a woman's job alone, it's society's job to raise our children.
Absolutely. So if we drill down then more into the public relations profession, are there things that you think C-suite executives should be thinking about, or things they should be doing to try to help protect or recapture some of those rights?
I'd like to say something about that.
Yeah, go.
Actually, corporate executives generally have been our friends. They, when I remember the now Legal Defense and Education Fund, now called Legal Momentum, at our dinner, my co-chair was the CEO of AT&T, and he stood up there and he said, when Now won that lawsuit against AT&T, it was the best thing that ever happened to us. It opened up this pool of talented, energetic women, and it's made us a better company. And I think generally companies realize that. They realize the value of promoting and using educated, talented, energetic women. Uh, so actually, I think we have less trouble with corporations than we do, frankly, with maybe the less educated people who are following misinformation.
Yeah, yeah. Well, then what about all of us sitting here in this room, right? Are there things that we can be doing that can make a difference? And I read the story. These are all individual women together, right? But they're individual women making a difference.
Right.
What can we do?
Right. I just also want to say,
Please.
what can we do? There were hundreds of thousands of people, women and men, who did something because they were angry about it. Maybe in their company, maybe in their labor union, maybe in their college, and they were angry and they changed it. And the Veteran Feminists of America, which I'm the chair of, published a book called Feminists Who Changed America. There are 2,200 people in that book, women and men. Every one of them was a leader who made a difference. And every one, you can all be leaders. You can make a difference. What makes you angry? That's what you have to do something about.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. Well, maybe since you mentioned books as well, what are there things that, and there are so many, what would you say are the biggest things that public relations professionals can learn from your book?
Well, I think they can just learn what a difference we can make and what a difference telling the story truthfully can make.
Yeah.
I mean, it was communications that really helped to build Now. The word got out immediately. And when we had our big march in 1970, August 26th, small towns marched. People all over the world, in Paris and London, marched because they got the story. We were on the front page of the New York Times. And this is what told people what they could do. Each person could begin to do something, and it began to energize people. So communications, first of all, can tell the truth, and then it can mobilize and energize people, organize them.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned the word march, right? I think of the Women's March that happened
Right.
a couple of years ago, but we haven't marched again. Why do you think women's activism maybe isn't as visible as it used to be?
Well, I think it is. But I think we're doing what has to be done. And number one is get out the vote. That's number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So I think women are doing that, and certainly women and men are still active through Now, through many other organizations, through Me Too, through Black Lives Matter, through all the organizations, through our local political parties, through our school boards. Everybody should decide, how can I make a difference? and what do I want to change,
Mhm.
and then do it.
Yeah.
And do it because it can be done.
Before we move to Q&A, you just reminded me, I love the first line of this book, so I'm going to read it. She says, "This book is about the people who changed women's lives. Everyone or everywhere, forever. History should not forget their achievements." And that includes your wonderful achievements as well. So I know we have folks who have questions. So what we would like to do is we'll take a question from the audience, and then we have so many folks who are listening on Zoom as well. So we will kind of go back and forth between questions from the audience and questions on Zoom. So maybe we'll start, please, if you would. So the question is, how can we deal with this issue of the word feminism, and at times using it may have sort of negative meanings to others? So please, Miriam.
Well, there were times, right, when feminist was the F word. I think now it's again really very much in fashion.
Yeah.
And we explain that feminism is partnership. It's partnership between women and men, between boys and girls, and it's equality for everyone. And it's something now. I remember Gloria Steinem once said, "I'm not a feminist, I'm a humanist." But now she understands and has been a big champion for feminism. But we have to understand it's not special privileges for women, it's partnership.
Yeah. And I think that's one of the key phrases you used in that first press release, right? We're talking about partnership.
Right.
That's what we're talking about. So I think that's
Right.
fabulous. Matilda, do you have a question from Zoom? So, so our question from the Zoom is, what would you attribute your determination to? Where did that come from? Where is all your tenacity, all your determination?
Well, I guess it comes from optimism. We can make a difference. Oh, I mean, when I was told we don't hire women at Carby, I went away and took another job. But then I heard of another opening there, and they said, no, the head of the radio and television department, he's a good guy. You can get a job there. So I went there with optimism, and we can do it. I think that's the answer.
Absolutely, absolutely. And that's an important word for us to keep in mind right now in so many ways. You talk about the politics, right? How important that is. Another question from our audience here, please. Yeah. So for our folks who are on Zoom, the question is, what do you attribute your success to?
Well, I mean, Business Week magazine called me the #1 woman in public relations. And, I started, from being told we don't hire women. And then when I became the youngest vice president, they said, well, you've gone as far as you can go because CEOs don't relate to women. Every step of the way, there was, a put down, frankly. And it just again saying, I'm going to show them, we're going to show them. But you have to be very, very professional, very confident. And also, I would say, I mean, part of what we did now was we had to be accepted. We were revolutionaries, but we frankly had to be accepted by the people in power. So that really requires a great deal of confidence and a great deal of ability. And as we all know, women can't make as many mistakes as men do, but that's all right because we can handle it.
Absolutely. A question from Zoom. So the question is, as a public relations professionals, we have such a divisive world in so many ways these days. How do you attempt to communicate in this divisive world, to try to deal with controversial topics? Do you think there are some strategies that can be used by public relations professionals in this very divisive context?
Well, it's a problem to be heard. There are so many voices out there, many of them telling lies, and many of them just opposing us. So it's very important to be right up there and not to be afraid to speak up and write up and you know, be pushy, frankly. But when you're pushy, you better know what you're doing. That's the important thing.
Absolutely. Yeah, please. Yeah. So the question is, what's a good way for women to start getting involved, especially as you said, as we're passing that torch, what are good ways to get started in making a difference?
Well, first of all, decide what are you going to work on? I mean, because the world's so full of problems. So decide, how can I make a difference? And then find organizations. You know, Sheryl Sandberg and Lean In was sort of implying that a woman can do it all by herself, you know, by insisting on her own rights. It doesn't work that way. You've got to be part of a strong organization. Now is still a very strong organization. There are others. There are groups. You can organize a group in your business. You can organize a group in your labor union. You can organize a group around an issue that's important to you. But you have to get others. You have to get allies. You have to have coalitions, maybe with people who don't agree with you on everything. But you use them, let them use you to join together. Think about the goal and who can help you with that.
What a great example of public relations for the social good, right? It's so much about how we can use our tools and our talents to mobilize and create so much social change. Absolutely. So today, the question is, today we have 80% women who are in the public relations field. I'm not sure it's 80% in the upper echelons of the field, right? But can you tell us a little bit about why you think it is a female-dominated field?
I don't know. There are people who know the answers better than I do. But I know one thing is that public relations depends on results. And I think women proved that they could get results, and therefore they were moved ahead. And also the whole ambiance changed. And this was the women's movement, the women's revolution that changed the world. I mean, I didn't get my promotions only because I'm so good. I got them because we now changed the world, and because people fought for change. So I think that's also one reason that it happened. We're part of the civil rights movement. Why did the civil rights movement make so much progress? Because people work together, and we have to continue doing that and find out who are your allies and work with them, especially this election year.
So the question is was there someone in particular who inspired you to go into communication and public relations?
Well, I wanted to be a newspaper reporter, and all the newspapers were folding. So that's how I ended up in public relations. Was there somebody who inspired me to move ahead in feminism? You've got to talk about Betty Friedan. And I hope all of you, when you read my book, will understand how important she was. She was impossible. As I said at one of the memorials for her, she was not a good woman, but Betty Friedan was a great woman. And she made the difference. And she showed how imperfect people can make a difference. You don't have to be a paragon of perfection. If you know what needs to be done, you can do it, even with imperfections.
That's one of the things I think folks would enjoy about the book. You have so many personal documents that are in there. And if you see, she has a memo, a letter that was the first time Betty reached out to you and said, hey, I think you might be interested. Would you like to join us? And I think it was $5 to join the National Organization for Women at that point. But you see the budding, right, just movement beginning in all of the different documents that you share. And that's one of the treasures, I think, of the book. Question from online. Oh, so the question is there a female leader today who you admire, who you really think you admire? You may not agree with her on everything, but you think it's someone that is a good role model in terms of, yeah.
You know, one of them is Kamala Harris, the Vice President of the United States. And I think she is very underestimated. She was sort of, I think, was given a backside role in the past, but I hope they're going to bring her forward. She's really inspiring, her story and also her ideals. And she's working very hard for reproductive rights. That's certainly an issue that's especially important to her.
Right. I think the person who asked the question online said, what about Liz Cheney? If you may not agree with her, do you admire her?
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
I'm very grateful to Liz
Yeah,
Cheney.
yeah.
She brought out the truth. And it's important. People who don't agree with us on everything have to fight for the truth because we are surrounded by lies and they're damaging all of us. So we have to propose the truth and support it.
So the question is, when you began, was it a male-dominated field?
Yes.
And how did you navigate that there in the office and trying to succeed? It's a great question.
I just really, I was smart. I mean, I really was. And I did a good job. And incidentally, in our department, there was a man who was making more money than I was. And he went home at 5:15 on the train every night. And I worked until 6 o'clock till my husband picked me up. And then I took work home. And then when our boss was promoted, guess what? A lot of people were surprised, but I was appointed head of the department. So it's excellence, frankly, and don't be afraid to show it. On the other hand, when things are not fair, sometimes we just have to do it anyway. It's unfair, but we got to do it and just do it better than anybody else.
So the question, so she is an advocate for and a victim of domestic violence. And so her question is, what advice, what encouragement would you give to women who are in that situation and for those who are advocating for women in that situation?
Well, their organizations, Legal Momentum has a hotline for victims of domestic violence and discrimination. So you can look up Legal Momentum in the phone book and call them and they will help you. The Sims Legal Momentum Hotline. And there are other organizations. And incidentally, the Violence Against Women Act, you know who thought of that act and who was the brainchild of? A senator named Joe Biden in 1990. He came to us with the idea for the Violence Against Women Act. And we got it passed in 1994, but it was Joe Biden's idea. And he fought for it and has helped us ever since.
Absolutely, that's terrific. How do you know or decide when to speak up? If someone, for example, is making you feel uncomfortable, maybe you're in a male-dominated workplace and you're feeling demeaned, when do you decide when to fight the fight, right? When to speak up and when perhaps not to speak up?
Well, I'd say most of the time speak up, but smile. And because I think most people don't speak up enough. But again, I think we have to listen and let people know that you have heard what they are saying, and then you can progress from there. I hope progress is the word and succeed.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's interesting. We're talking all about communication strategies, and that's the first time we've used the word listen, right? How important that is to understand your audience, right? To be able to connect. So the question is, when we watch the news and what's going on right now between Hamas and the Palestinians, would you label that or call that a woman's issue?
Well, peace is a women's issue, of course, and safety is a women's issue. And there are two sides to it. I mean, the horrible sexual violence that was intentionally committed on October 7th has to be told to the world. And on the other hand, we have to look to the future. And I personally think a two-state solution. And certainly it's a women's issue because women's issues are family issues. And that's why, as you know, there's this huge gender gap. It's amazing how many more women are voting and working for issues that we all believe in, and then frankly are interested in other things very often, including revenge or hatred. Not all men, I mean, most men actually are great supporters, but there are more women who understand family issues.
What was the moment in your career that was maybe most important to you or marked you the most, made you most important?
I think that moment when I got the chair, to be the head of the department, was a big moment for me. I was so scared. I didn't tell my parents. I was calling them that night, and I didn't dare tell them. I was so frightened. How could a young girl like me get this job? And the confidence that came from being recognized. And incidentally, the president of our agency said, "Well, Muriel, you've come a long way. We'll see if you've come too far." And then I much later he said, "You deserve it, and I'm glad you came this far. And you're an asset to us." But that was, I think, maybe the most exciting moment for me in the career.
What is your creative outlet and what do you do in your free time?
Love it.
When I'm retired. I'm 96 years old, by the way, and so anyway, when I was working at Carl Bayer, 60 hours a week, and working for now a lot of time as a volunteer and raising 2 children, I had no creative outlets. I had no girlfriend except those who were business friends. There was just absolutely no leisure time, no optional time. Well, what would I like to do today? But there are times in our lives when we have to go through that. And you do come out at the end and you get more leisure when you're as old as I am.
So what are the kinds of things that you enjoy today? What are the other hobbies you have besides writing a book? But what are the other things you enjoy doing?
Well, I love opera. I live in a retirement community in Tarrytown called Kendall on Hudson. And we have all these courses. Today I had a course on Pushkin, the Russian poet. And I also saw the ping pong pro that I brought to Kendall to teach our people ping pong. So I started an opera committee and the ping pong committee.
You're organizing.
Right, we're all organizing, and I love good food.
So the question is, what were your experiences being a mother and a professional at that point?
It's very, very hard. It really is. And it's harder for people today. Frankly, in those days, there were people available, usually women of color, who worked in household service, and they made life easier for us, and I could afford it. Today, it's very, very difficult for young people to raise a family. And that's again the reason why we've got to have organized childcare for the benefit of our children, as well as the women and the mothers and the fathers.
You love opera. Are there any particular composers that you enjoy listening to, in the sense of either folks who are in opera or also folks who are doing orchestral music?
Oh, sure, absolutely. I mean, Verdi, Puccini, Alban Berg. I love them all. I mean, I think opera is a great opportunity to enjoy life, and I hope people will support the Metropolitan Opera, keep it alive. I'm sorry that the New York City Opera is no longer alive. That was a great privilege for all of us.
So the question is, what was it like to work with Gloria Steinem?
I still work with her. She's wonderful.
Ah.
Gloria Steinem is just, in my book, I say that she's the same. She is. She's generous, she's giving, she's loving. When Betty Friedan died, Betty was not a saint, I said that it takes hostile people to make revolutions. Betty was a hostile person. She was angry, but she was our leader. Gloria disagrees with me. She says kind, gentle people can make revolutions too. And it's been wonderful working with her. She has proved that kind, gentle people can make a difference. So she's just a joy to work with today.
Do you work with her in the Veterans Feminist Organization?
Yes, and just telling the world our story. Whenever there's a conference, Gloria's there. She's willing to help out.
Well, it's interesting when you're talking about different strategies and tactics for social change and social movements, but you're doing it right here, right? Just being here and speaking with all of us is a part of that. It's such an important part to keep that history alive and to inspire all of us every day.
Right, and writing the book.
Yeah.
I mean, I didn't think I was going to write a book. Writers came to me all the time and went through my files and looked through my files for their books, and that was fine. But I don't know. Around recently, I just got mad. I got angry because people never heard of Betty Friedan. People never heard it now. And we have to not only tell about Betty Friedan, we have to tell about Mary Eastwood and all these other people. They did it, and so I was really intensely interested in telling this story.
Yeah. And I love the way you put it in the book. You say that, you know, other people have written about the women's movement, journalists or academics, from a more sort of taking a step back perspective, right? You write from a very passionate, you can hear the passion
Right.
in your writing.
And we made a lot of mistakes. We did a lot of things very wrong, and we were very mean to each other. But that's part of the story.
So just a powerful question, right? From your perspective, how did the feminine mystique change lives?
Every time I sat in a restaurant with Betty Friedan or walked across the street with her, a woman came up to Betty and said, "You changed my life." She made women realize that there's a world out there and that there's nothing wrong with wanting satisfaction apart from raising a family. That can be part of your life, but there's more out there. And Betty woke people up, to millions and millions of people across the world, made them understand the importance of women playing a role in society. We're no longer subordinates. We're partners. And Betty's the one, and she always used the expression full equality for women and truly equal partnership with men. That was Betty's word. And instead, Betty thought of the name of NOW. That was Betty's name, National Organization for Women. Our statement of purpose, Betty Friedan wrote most of it with help from Pauli Murray, a very important Black feminist leader. But Betty's the one mostly who did it, and she was the president of NOW in our first 4 years and gave us so much of our energy and our strategy and our ideas and our vision.
Oh, I'm just curious, like, what books would you recommend somebody read? Obviously, excited to
Right,
so excited to read.
Well, we'll start with my book, which The Women's Revolution, which is coming out June 18. You can you can order it now, I think, from your local bookstore, Barnes and Noble, Amazon. It'll arrive a little after June 18. Gail Collins wrote a wonderful book called How Everything Changed.
Mhm.
And I certainly recommend that also.
I think the gentleman back here had a
Yeah,
question.
So first of all, thank you so much for answering, so many of our questions. And so you mentioned earlier that, of course, over the years that people have asked for you to, to write books and to give advice and to, answer our questions like in this panel. But what is something that people don't ask you that you want people to ask you?
So that's a great question. So, you've answered so many questions, right?
yeah.
What don't people ask you? What are the kinds of questions perhaps you wish people would ask that might be revealing? That's a good.
Okay, I'll start with who was Paulie Murray? Who was Mary Eastwood? Who was Holly Knox? I want people to know who these people were. That's what I hope they will ask.
Thank you so much.
Tell us what advice you would have for people about learning from their mistakes. This book, you say we're not perfect, right? There were things that were ugly, that weren't effective. What advice would you have about learning from your mistakes?
Well, I remember Billie Jean King used to say, if you miss a shot, that's feedback. It shows you what you have to do right next time.
Mhm.
And that's the same thing, in baseball. Nobody bats 1,000. So we just have to understand and I guess be compassionate for our mistakes and for the mistakes of others.
Yeah. And
And think of it as an opportunity to learn feedback.
yeah. So what were the things you enjoyed the most of either your PR career at Bayer or also your PR work with now?
And I also have to say, I was fortunate. I had a wonderful marriage.
Oh.
And I wish everybody
Yeah.
could be as happily married as I was. My husband was 48 years, and he was the first chair of the board of New York Now, and was always there. And he was a doctor, Dr. Shepard Aronson. And when people would say, Shep, what's a doctor like you doing in the women's movement? He'd say, I want my wife to make more money. And of course, I have great joy. I have a wonderful son and daughter. They're both psychologists, both very active feminists, and 3 grandchildren who are all also working to make this a better world. So I think I'm very fortunate. We must have done something right, even though I was very frustrated in those years, and wish I could spend more time with the children. And I still, if I were asked what do I wish I could have done differently, somehow I wish I could have found more time to spend with the children, but I'm not sure how I would have done it.
Only so many hours in a day.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely. How would you describe the way that women were portrayed in media in the 60s? So maybe even just commercials or TV shows. How would you describe that?
Well, that was a very important thing we did. In addition to getting jobs and getting education, changing the minds of people. And as you know, they were portrayed as being dependent, as being frivolous, or they weren't there. They were absent. And so we really did have to change the mind of the media. And frankly, we still have a long way to go. And still, I think the depiction of women very often is not serious enough. So there's something we still have to work on.
Absolutely. Yeah, and the media today we have in our hands. We have phones, we have all the social media. You're bombarded by those messages in ways that even then you weren't, because it's always present in so many interesting ways. So I just want to close with a thank you and a personal thank you, because I have a wonderful partner as well in my life, Joe, who the idea of partnership and being able to live that fulfilling life, you all open the doors for all of us. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Muriel, and thank you so much, Karen Medved, for moderating this fantastic panel. Thank you to everyone who's here with us in person tonight, and we want to give a special thank you to the sponsor of this event, which is Hunter PR. We also want to thank you to the organization who provides ongoing support to the PR Museum which is our founding partner, Edelman, our underwriters, BCW and APCO Worldwide. We have our sustaining sponsors, which include Google, the University of Georgia Grady College of Journalism and Mass Communications, and Honeywell, the Page Society, and the Wallace Foundation, and last but not least, CNO. I want to plug again Muriel's book, which she said will be coming out on June 18th. We have the press release here with us. We also have a few copies for the people who's with us here in the room to look through. And again, thank you both so much. I hope to see you all here again. Please interact with us on social media. We're on LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook, you name it, X or Twitter.
Yeah.
And we'll see you soon again. Thank you all so much.
Wonderful.